Hello and welcome to this slow and methodical soldering of the ASMR, a simple mixer, right? If you buy it in the shop with everything, this is what you get: a box of components, the panel and the PCB backboard. And there is a few things that we need to consider before we start soldering on this board. So this is built for a couple of reasons. It is built to be cheap and it's built to be simple to solder. I've also tried to make it as quiet as possible and as good as possible, but of course if you buy, the price is an indication of quality as well. If you do buy one of the bigger, pricier mixers, you will probably get a bigger, better mixer as well. But this one is good for us beginners, I think. I've used this a lot in my modular and I cannot complain. I am, however, biased. Keep that in mind. A few things I've added. So there's one out already that looks like this. There's a few connections missing on the older one, but that is not a problem. I will show you how to do this. But I've added a few solder points on this new one. And pointing to these are, first of all, to keep costs down, the jacks I'm using are actually stereo jacks, and I figured that the output, because sometimes or very often you want to put this one directly into a mixer or an audio interface or whatever outside gear, and then especially if you put it into a DAW or a computer, you want to have stereo out. So there's a solder point here that you can just solder together and you will get stereo out. So you get the mono channels on both channels. That's good. This is not on the old board, but you can just solder these 2 points together. That is what this little thing there does. So just put a small lead between these two and you will have stereo out. Also, this is also a difference from the old version, is that I made a small white part here so you can write what you want this second output to be, because the first output is just output either mono or stereo, whatever you want, and the second one is inverted output, so it's an inverted signal of this one. This is good, especially when working with CV signals, but when using it for audio signals, it's not that useful. Therefore, I added this little thing here that you can choose to either solder for dual out or inverted out, and you need to solder one of these together. So either you just double the output from the first one, or you have the inverted output. So that depends if you want to use it for audio or if you want to use it as CV signal as well. And this one is also a little thing up here that you can choose to have it stereo, because if you have it as a dual output of that one, you might want to have them both as stereo, or you might want to have one stereo and one mono, and then you can choose that. And yeah, so that's it. And then also coming a future module, not that far in the future, is an expander for this one, and that's called the Amex. And there's the input for the Amex up there. On the old board there is not an input for the Amex, but you can just, I'll put in down here, I'll write now which resistor you can add it to. I even think it is, yeah, so it is R2, so you can just add it. If you want to have the AMX and you have the older board, you can just solder the AMX to R2, the top part of that resistor. But on the new one, there's an input for that, and then there's ground outputs down here to get it to get ground to the AMX. Let me show you how that looks. So this is a work in progress, but technically you will get 7 more channels to your mixer, just routed out through the same outputs. So if you want to have many inputs in your mixer, don't buy many of these. Wait for the AMX to come around, and it will be a better way to, so you buy one of these and one of the AMX to get lots of inputs. And one thing that is still missing, that is coming in the next version, is the smoothing capacitors, one on each side, so 100 nanofarad capacitors. I do send them along in the package, and I'll show you how to add them on both this board and this board. It's the same procedure. Another thing is that the C1 and C2 capacitors are not, you don't need to. And one more thing is that the C1 and C2 capacitors are not needed in most cases. They are for the cases where you do have a low hum, and these two can take away that some noise sounds that you might have in your mix. If you don't have the sound or noise, you don't need these two capacitors. So it's up to you if you want to solder these in place or not. I will do it today because I'll show how to do every component today. So let's take the old one away for now. And here are the components. So I do send along a lot of 10K resistors, and this is for the, just after the potentiometer there is this resistor, and this resistor decides how much gain you will get on that specific channel. And with 10K, and these are supposed to be 10K, you get 0 gain or 1-to-1 ratio on the output and the input. But these are actually 20% tolerance, which is really high, which means that it can go everything from 8K to 12K, and sometimes you just want a bit more gain. So by lowering these, for example putting a 6.8K instead of the 10K on these here, you will get a, I think it's 1.5 to 1 gain or something like that. So there's a lot of potential of doing your own thing. So if you have one module that is really much lower in volume than all the other ones, then just put a lower resistor on that channel and always use that channel for that module, and you will get more gain on that one. If you have one that is really, really loud, then you take a higher value of this one to lower it even more. So let's take all the panel components and put to the side for now. And what we have left is this here. And of course these. So we can start by adding the resistors. So there's one resistor that is a different value, and then the rest is just 10K. And this is R6 and is 100 ohm. And we have R6 right there. Now, one of these helping hands is good to have in these circumstances. I'm also going to turn on the fan, so there will be a slight background noise. And all the resistors also need to be a bit slanted to be able to fit, and it's a tight fit, and yeah, that's just the way this one works. So that's the 100 ohm in place, and now we can take all these 10K ohms and just put them in all the other R sockets. These are placed on the back side like this, so it should be easy for you. If you choose to replace one of them afterwards, it is possible to just unsolder them and put another one in place quite easy, I think. And then we solder these in place. I need to add some solder to this side as well. I'm satisfied. Right. Next we can add the socket, and here you have an indentation in the silk screen, and that should be with where the indentation on the part is. Like so. And we solder that in place. It's always good to start with the two corner ones just to keep it in place. If it's not correctly pressed down, then you can, on that side that you need to press it down, you just press with your finger. Be careful so you don't press on that pin that you are heating up with the iron, and then it should be pressed down all the way. Like so. And then we can add the capacitors. We begin with the small ones, and one is 47 picofarad and one is 27 picofarad. And the 47 in this case is easy. It says 47 and nothing more, and that's 47 picofarad. And that is C2, so that one. This one is 27 picofarad because of that, but let's see. Yeah, it's really faint, but it actually says 27 there. And these legs are a bit further apart, but we can still squeeze it in like so. And we solder these in place. These are not polarized, so it doesn't matter which way you turn them. Now the next capacitor though is polarized. And that's this one. It should be 10 microfarad. And that is one over here, C3. And you see there's one white part of this little symbol and one black part with a plus. And here you see on this there's a white stripe with a minus on it and a black, and also the black side is longer. So the black that is not white and with a minus sign, the black is of course plus, and the white with the minus sign is minus. Also the tall one is plus. So many ways to decide which is plus and minus. It's almost confusing, at least when I start rambling. So this is all the parts for the mixer, and then these three here is for the power. And as I said before, on this board there is no holes for the two capacitors. Those are, again, I have never needed these in my modular so far. I don't know why. It really shouldn't. It really should be noisy, but it's still good to have them just in case. So the power jack you just solder in place. If you have one that is encapsulated, which I only send these 2x5 pins, so you won't worry about here. But the one that have a plastic shell around it, that is actually important which way you turn it, because that decides how the power cable with this little ledge here will be able to fit in. So, but with these just pins open like this, it's not important. Now, here's a bit of the tricky part. Now we need to add all the panel components on this side, and then we need to fit it so it sits okay with the hole, so it shouldn't touch to, or the pot shouldn't stick to one side and stuff like that. And also we have this thing with, again, to keep costs down, these jacks are again stereo pots, and the lug for the ground is up here and actually need to be a through hole. So what you do is you do like so, and you take one of the legs of one of the other components that you've added, and and you solder that in place like so. So quite simple. But again, as I said, with this version you actually get, as long as you just do this with one of them, all of the jacks are connected together and grounded via this. When you add the screw, you add ground to all the pins, as long as you do this on one of them. So we add the components, and make sure you turn it correctly, so the two down here, the ground lug should be upwards, and then the rest should all be facing down with the ground. And you need to squeeze it a bit so it's bent down. If you have Donkey Kong jacks at home, or if you buy them from somewhere else, you can use them as well. They are a bit more cheap. They are a bit more expensive, but of course much better quality probably. These should snap quite nice in place. Right, and then we add the panel. Still haven't soldered anything together, so everything is quite loose, and we add a few of these just to keep just tighten it a bit, and this is just so we can move it around once when we want to adjust this. And then something like that, I think. And now we need to solder this together, and we can't let go because then everything will just fall apart. So find something to place it on, like so, for example. Let's see, here's a good thing. And again, it is good to just solder a few of these in place. And you need quite a lot of solder for these to get stuck, because it's a lot of metal and it's quite large holes. So again, let's see if this looks good. Yeah, trying not to move too much around. And again, just checking so they feel okay. And I think that it is easier to do like this, that you actually add the pin for the ground from this side when the panel is on, because then you can put it through the first hole, put it through the lug on the jack, and then when you turn it like this, the panel holds it in place. So we can actually solder this in place here. And then we just either we remove the panel to solder it back, and again we can add this to everyone. It's not that big of a deal, really. You can never have enough ground either, right? Like so. And we solder these in place. Then we need to get in there with the soldering iron. This is also one thing, they do stick out a bit, these connectors, but that is fine. You can, if you want, snip them off, but you can also leave them. They shouldn't touch anything, as everything else sticks out a bit as well. Let's see if we can get in and solder these. Kind of just wedge the soldering iron into between the two, and you get them to, you can heat them both up. As I said, you might as well do this. There could be a time where one of these screws may become loose a bit, and that way you would lose ground to one of the jacks, and that's not good. So last thing, to put all these back on, and this is what keeps the module together, so that's why we need to have these as well. And it can be a good idea to tighten them with a tool. And final thing, to put the IC in the socket, and this is again, you need to make sure that pin 1 is to the upper left of that indentation in the socket. And I believe on the one I have here there is a small circle up there, so that should be, so that should be pin 1. Either there is a circle where pin 1 is, or there is an indentation in the IC as well. So the last part we need to add is the 100 nanofarad decoupling caps and the 10 microfarad smoothing caps that you put over the power supply, and the decoupling caps on the IC. So you don't have to have these, but just to really make sure to keep the noise down, it's good to have these as well. And these are not in the version 1 and 1.1 or 1.2. It's not on the PCB. So this is what I talked about in the live session. If you saw that you need to solder these together. Those of you that bought this version will have to solder these together on the back side, as I will show you right now. So let's begin with these, maybe. These are the 10 microfarad caps that we're going to put as close to the power strip as possible, and that is actually on the power strip in this case. So let's see which is which here. We have negative on that side, so if we begin with negative, this one here, that means, because these 10 microfarad caps are polarized again, so the negative side is the white side with a minus on, and the negative side is supposed to be towards the negative minus 12 volts there, and the positive sign to ground. So just that one. When we're working with negative power, it is a bit confusing that maybe that positive should be the ground, but negative is lower than 0, so, and that's why it needs to be there. There. And the other one, of course, positive side towards the positive strip, and negative side towards ground. So there it is correct. Not as difficult mind bump, or whatever we should call it. No. And we can bend them in like so, so they're not in the way for the rack. Just make sure that it doesn't touch the rack. That would be really bad. So really make sure that won't happen, and that you won't get a short circuit on these two. That one is actually better because it was really short, so there's no way of getting a short there. Right, and then the decoupling caps for the TL072. We have pin 1 is, let's see, where can I get this? Pin 1 is up there, so that means that we have pin 4 down there, and we connect pin 4 to pin 3 because pin 3 is ground, and we can check this with a multimeter and just with a diode checker, and we touch one ground and we touch pin 3, and it should connect. It does. So from pin 4 to pin 3, so with we need to bend the legs so it's really close, and maybe cut them off a bit as well. And when it's this close, I would suggest you have something to hold with. So you don't burn yourself. And this, as I've said before, this will be fixed in the next version, so you actually have... So anyone who will buy this after this video is released will have a somewhere to place these. But I'll guess I'll have to do another soldering video for that. And again, make sure it doesn't touch anything. And that should be there. And then pin 8. And we can put pin 8 to pin 5, which should also be. So pin 8 up there. Pin 8 and pin 5. That one. Oh yeah, that one, and ground, of course. Yeah. So a little bit longer legs. A little bit longer. Eight to 5. Working 9. No, that's 9 to 5. The Dolly Parton song. Right, and these can't be over this here because then they will mess with the panel. Something like that. Right, so these two or these 4 caps does make a mess, and I'll fix that in the final, not the final, but the next iteration of this, and we'll see what I miss in that one instead. So let's put the panel on, back on, and we can try this out in the rack. Only thing left is to hook this in and see if there's magic smoke or if it worked. Again, there is a small extra white square on one of the pins down here, looking like this. It's the one on the left, and that is where the red stripe should be. So we connect it like so, and let's see, we start the power. There is nothing that shows that this is working or not because there's no LEDs on this. Nothing started smoking and nothing is crazy hot, so that usually means it's working. Let's put it in the modular and find out. I am going to use this one as my audio mixer going into my DAW so I can record stuff when I'm doing a jam or something like that. So that's why I am also going to solder the stereo out. I want this one to be stereo out, and I do not want to have inverted output on this one. I want it to be dual out, so I soldered those two together, and I want that one to be stereo as well. So there, I've made my choices. Let's put it in the... So here you see it in the rack, and it is working. There's a VCO going in here. Because it's linear pots, it is quite fast response on the pots, so just a little bit actually gives a lot of volume. There's the two outputs I can use now. I have stereo output into my DAW, and I can also use my headphones to listen to whatever I record without having it in the speakers. So that's really good to have that. And now I can finally remove my first prototype of this mixer, where the pots go the other way around, so where this is no volume and that is max volume. So good to get that one out of there. Thanks for watching. You find this in the shop, and in a while there will also be the AMEX, a modular expander. So look out for that one as well. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.